This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Go to the link in the description below so they know that I sent you. Hello everyone, I'm Nizzahon, and this is Limited Recall, a podcast that looks at Magic's limited formats, that's where the limited part comes in, as well as at the game's history, that's where the recall part comes in. As usual, I'm joined by my co-host Mike from Mythic Tales. How are you today, Mike?
Oh, pretty good. Haven't got a ton of chance to dive into M20 yet, but pretty excited about a lot of the new cards, at least for limited. From what I've seen on the standard end of things, doesn't seem super great net right now because one of our limited all-stars, Risen Reef, is apparently just like tearing up the format. So
I was kind of surprised to see that. As good as that card is and as excited as I was for it, I didn't look at it and think it would be amazing and constructed, but that's cool. It's a cool card.
Yeah, it just provides so much value, especially when you've got incidental triggers on things like the Thorn Lieutenant. Yeah, Thorn Lieutenant already gives you some card advantage and gives you a little bit of ramp. And then, with Risen Reef on top of that, it just gets out of control. And then we've got all of our classical problem cards like Nexus of Fate. And then now Flood of Tears is apparently also really tearing things up, which honestly didn't see that coming. I saw a little bit of potential because we do have things like Omniscience in the format. So turns out it's pretty good when you can like pick things up and then play Omniscience for free and then play them all again for free because of Omniscience. So yeah, that's
pretty crazy. There's also like a vampire deck in standard all of a sudden thanks to Sorin, right?
Yeah, Sorin definitely gave that deck a big old boost. And then that little one drop beater that we talked about last time, that thing's pretty bonkers. So definitely puts a clock on your opponent. So
Knight of the Ebon Hand or something like that.
Yeah, that guy's pretty insane.
Pretty ridiculous and limited too, but I've had some bad beats against it. I haven't drafted it yet myself.
How's drafting been for you so far since the set released?
It's been pretty good. I was lucky enough to get into the early access event, and that was fun. I got to play against, some other content creators like Frank Lepore and Newmont. Newmont beat me, but I beat Frank Lepore. And I kind of punted the Newmont game, which was frustrating, but it was fun playing against them. I forgot that one of my cards was not an instant, which is the kind of thing I should probably know doing a set review, but it's still easy to sort of, this must be an instant and forget it. At least if you're me, it is. And so that was bad. But it was fun, and the format so far has been pretty fun. It doesn't feel, someone in my chat asked me today if this was one of the best formats, other than Dominaria lately. And I was like, at this point, maybe it is because there haven't been a lot of really impressive limited formats to me in a while since Dominaria. Maybe it is, but it's still early in the format, but I do like it a lot. And it's nice that there aren't like as many bombs around. I don't miss that, certainly from War of the Spark. So yeah, I've been enjoying it for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into it, but my competitive side just has me wanting to wait until ranked comes out because I just can't stand playing and not making progress. And I've also had a few other games I've been playing on the side. I think I got a little bit magicked out, if I'm totally honest, just from set after set. In the last 2 months, I've played War of the Spark, Modern Horizons, Battle Bond, and then I guess, before that it was Ravnica. But yeah, just those 3 sets, and then, just everything Magic has just been, crazy, especially when you do what we do, you make content and stay really on top of things. It just got a little magicked out, I think, but I'm definitely ready for when rank comes around. I think once I can get into, some best of one, see how things are there, I'll probably enjoy it, I mean, I played a couple of normal drafts. I did one on Magic Online, which I was kind of shocked that I picked up. Or no, I did 2. And then I did 1 best of 3 on Arena. And I think both times I kind of punted a little bit in the draft section, which I think that might just be part of adjusting back to this style of format, because I found myself being like a little overly greedy with the stuff I was picking up and forgetting that the fixing is not as good in this format as it has been in the last few. So yeah,
it's pretty good for a normal set, but it's not like Guilds of Ravnica or Ravnica Allegiance, that's for sure.
Yeah, something we said last time, there are not dual lands in every pack. Then found that out pretty quickly. I was like, oh shoot, that's a basic land. I thought.
Yeah, I found that out too. I think they can replace them sometimes. I should probably have looked that up. They replace them some percentage of the time, but they don't always. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes me wonder if which format was that where they actually did put one in every pack? Was it Rivals of Ixalan?
It was Guilds of Ravnica, right? But you mean other than that?
Yeah, not the guild gates. There was another format where they did a dual land in every pack. I think it might have been Rivals of Ixalan, but I might be wrong
I
there.
feel like they did it in like Khans of Tarkir in that block too. But yeah, I don't remember if they did it in Ixalan. It didn't seem like that set had that good of fixing, but maybe they did.
Yeah, you might be right about that. I just knew there was some format in recent time where people were a little complaining about the fact that they were experimenting with it. Of course, I remember the complainers, but I remember thinking it was cool. And it was definitely separate from the guild gates, which obviously those were incredible for splashing colors. And turns out I was also, part of Arena. I was also playing Ravnica Allegiance because it was ranked right before M20 came out. So yeah, very easy yeah.
I was just gonna say they are going to have ranked like all the time for the new set soon, aren't they? Isn't that the plan going forward?
Yes, thank goodness. Starting with M20 ranked, the most recent set will always be available, and then they're still going to do the rotation. So I'm a big fan of that because, like we've talked about, like I really like playing Dominaria when it comes back, but when it comes to some of the other sets, they've just gotten a bit old. So
yeah. All right, well. That does, good introductory discussion about what we're doing in Magic these days and some of our thoughts about Core Set 2020. In this episode's limited portion, we will be going deeper in Core Set 2020, talking about a few things. Now that we've actually played the format, we're going to talk about a couple of cards that I think I really misjudged and found that quickly, and we're going to talk about those. And we're also going to talk more generally about the color hosing cards in the format, how they should be used, when they should be picked, and so forth, because I think I'm seeing some people really overvalue those a little bit. We'll talk more about that in a moment. The recall portion, we do have a recall this time. We didn't last time because Core Set 2020 was new, but this time we have a recall portion, and we're going to take a look back at the community's reaction to the announcement of Magic Online, as well as some early reactions once it was in beta from back in 2001 and 2002, which I thought would be interesting to parallel with, our own beta Magic Arena right now. And the reactions people are having. So, as usual, we will start with our limited portion first.
Decisions.
Challenge accepted.
So, one card I wanted to talk about as an overrated card that I overrated for limited anyway, as we just talked about, maybe it's pretty great and constructed, but that's Flood of Tears. Which is a sorcery that's 4 generic and 2 blue. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hand. And then if you return 4 or more permanents, non-land permanents, non-token permanents, and non-land permanents to your hand, you get to play something from your hand and just put it back out there. And I had this vision of that working out a lot in limited, but I tried to play it myself a couple times now, and the window, it's definitely the kind of card that I got excited about the ideal scenario with, which is something I'm usually pretty good about because I think, what percentage of the time will this actually do that? And in my head, it was like, half the time, but it turns out it's probably a lot less than that. So I think it went from being a card I would consider first picking to being maybe near unplayable. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I haven't got to play with it yet, but I can definitely see the fail case. I mean, and I'm sure you knew the fail case going in as well. How often that happens really is just dependent on the format. And, apparently it sounds like it becomes a little bit too symmetrical of an effect too often that, maybe it's just not worth it. Because, like, on its face, just looking at the set, I would think that there'd definitely be some play that you could have there with the flying elemental, the 3 mana 2/1 flyer that draws a card when it enters the battlefield. Yeah, that's a common. So, when I'm theory crafting it in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, there's plenty of good payoffs. And, in Esper colors, you do get some ETB effects, more so Sultai, but you could build like an Esper ETB build, or even just a blue-black build around enters the battlefield triggers where you'd want to pick up things so that if the fail case was there, you'd still get a little bit of value for getting like some kind of decent enters the battlefield trigger. But yeah, most of the time you want that to not be symmetrical, and it sounds like you're running into that case more often than not then.
Yeah, and I think there are even times where, sure, I get to do that and maybe I get to play something, but my opponent was so far ahead of me, it doesn't really matter. I mean, they're going to get to replay everything they played. The downside for those sort of evacuation effects is always that your opponent gets to rebuild before you do. And I thought the upside would be, well, I get to play something for free, but sometimes it just doesn't matter. Like, and that's the thing. It's not a really powerful card, even in most ideal scenarios. It's going to be at its best when you and your opponent are sort of equal. If your opponent's ahead of you, they're just going to untap, play their stuff again. And, additionally, there are lots of Into the Battlefield triggers in this format, and they get those again too. So yeah, it's really disappointed me. And it's kind of sad because I thought it would be fun to pull it off, but maybe I need to play Constructed, I guess, if I want to do wacky things with Flood of Tears, where you can cheat things into play, like Omniscience,
Yeah.
So
I guess I could see if you had enough like big old bombs, that where you are actually cheating on mana, then it might be great. But honestly, I haven't seen decks come together that really lean on, like big creatures so much. A lot of the games that I have played so far have been mostly just low to the ground, like flyers, things like that. Honestly, the biggest card that I usually see come down is like Howling Giant has been probably the most swingy, higher cost card that you see on a regular basis.
Oh yeah.
And then most of the time, because we're not drafting in pods, I just see so many flyers decks, flyers or elementals, one of those two.
Yeah, those two decks seem to be pretty good. I like that Giant a lot too. I liked it going into the set. He's about as good as I thought he would be. Yeah, I was a little worried that he might not be as good because there's some formats where 7 drops aren't a thing, but they seem to be a thing in this format. This format seems to be, I think it seems to be, mid-rangey, slow enough. And for that reason, there's also another card that I think I underrated, one that I underrated instead of overrated. That's better than I expected it to be, and that's Goblin Smuggler, who's 2 and a red for a 2/2 Goblin haste. And you can tap him to give something with power 2 or less, make it unblockable until end of turn. And in my mind, I was like, this is like 2 pretty mediocre cards stapled together. How excited should I be for this? A 3-mana 2/2 with haste isn't that good. A 3-mana 2/2 that taps to do that ability isn't that good. But it turns out that ability is pretty good for more aggressive decks in this format. You find players stabilizing against you. There's enough ramp in this set that people can play that Giant on turn 6 and sort of stonewall you. That Giant is 5 green for a 5/5 with reach that puts 2 wolves into play. And once they play that, it's pretty hard for an aggro deck to find a way past that. But Goblin Smuggler can help you do that. And there's also enough creatures that you can modify the power of after you use the Smuggler, like Pack Mastiff and the Elemental Trailblazer guy who gets +1/+1 for each elemental you control for 2 green and a red as its activated ability. That there are times where you can just make one of those things unblockable and then swing for 7 or whatever if you have enough mana lying around. There's just enough creatures around that can benefit from it. Audacious Thief is really good with it. That's the 2 and a black for a 2/2. When it attacks, you lose a life and draw a card. There just seems to be enough little combos you can do with Goblin Smuggler, in addition to its own sort of utility of giving you some reach. That is a pretty solid playable for most red decks. And I thought it would be the kind of card you play if you kind of had a rough draft, basically. But I think you play one of them in most of your red decks and feel fine about it. And maybe even 2 if you have enough Audacious Thieves and stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely ran into that exact deck, the black-red aggro deck with the Audacious Thief, and oh man, when you can't block Audacious Thief, it gets out of hand pretty quick with that draw card ability. It kind of reminds me of, it was the 2-drop from Amonkhet that could tap and then give something, with power 2 or greater unblockable till end of turn. There was lots of times where that was pretty great, and then we also have cards like Uncaged Fury in this set where you can give something unblockable first and then unleash just a crap ton of damage, with giving them +1/+1 and double strike. So yeah, I think those things together definitely make it worth playing in most decks. And like you said, the board just constantly gets gummed up, and I think it's because most people are playing, more of the go wide decks, at least right now. Maybe that'll change over, as the format evolves and people get more used to building the, taller decks, like the more Sultai builds and things like that. But I just haven't seen them a whole lot. Obviously, I haven't played a lot of games, so don't trust me entirely on that, but it just makes a lot of sense to me why he's definitely one that's I might have underrated a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean he's been really nice. Yeah, we've had cards like him before. Like you're talking, it's like Goblin Trailblazer or something. What you're talking about, like 1 and a red for a 2/1 who could tap and do that, and that was good in that set because you had what was it called? They super tap, basically tap so they can't untap for a turn.
The exert mechanic.
Exert, that's it. Yeah. And so you could do that and then exert a creature and have it hit a lot harder, and that was a cool thing to have in that set. And we didn't have that in this set, like as obviously, but there seemed to be enough nice combos with the Smuggler that it's good here too. So yeah, been liking him much more than I expected to, and it's a lot of times when I learn that these cards are better than I expect them to be, it's because my opponents play them against me and destroy me with them, and that's pretty much what happened with the Smuggler. So another thing to talk about, I think more generally, are the color hosers in this set. There are 5 of them. Every color has one, and it's like they're 2, enemy colors, opposing colors that they do things with. For example, the red one is called Fry. It's 1 in a red, can't be countered, and it does 5 to a blue or white creature. So that means it's going to be useless a certain chunk of the time. Now, when I initially did like my set review and thought about this set, I said I would never mainboard these. But then people in the comments pointed out to me, well, 70% of the time they're going to be mainboardable, so you could mainboard them and then side them out. And I thought that sounded right math-wise, and then people sort of convinced me. But then as I've been playing, I think 30% of the time a card being blank is enough of a reason not to be starting it in your main board. I mean, I've tried doing both things and had the bad beats. If you have enough looting and rummaging, which there's a decent amount of in this set, maybe you do it. But I think mostly I want to recommend to people, don't play those in your main board. If you're playing best of 1, don't play them. If you're playing best of 3, take them relatively highly. I always say to take these over everything that's just sort of like a shrug-worthy playable, because when you bring them out of your sideboard, like Fry against a blue or a white deck is going to be one of the best cards in your entire deck. But against other people, it will be the worst card in your deck. Nothing will be worse in your deck than it. So I've seen a lot of people mainboarding them. I mean, and I tried it myself. I'm like 20-ish drafts in now. I've tried it enough to say, I don't think you should do it. And that's what I would recommend to people on the whole, that you don't want to do it. Now, maybe another corner case you may encounter is if you have a couple scuttlebutts who can change the color of things. So if you have a couple of those, maybe you can get away with it a little more. But there aren't enough other ways to do that in this set. And I think overall, again, don't mainboard them. So what do you think about that, Mike?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I can see where people are arguing that, every once in a while you can convince yourself that it's worth it to put a color hoser in your main board. But yeah, unless you're running like 2 or 3 scuttlebutts, that's just going to be a dead card. And, every once in a while you're going to end up with it in your opening hand or as your first draw. I guess actually with the London Mulligan now, you do have a little more control over whether that ends up in your opening hand or not.
That's true.
But that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a looter of some kind or a smuggle or a rummage, ability onto the board to make sure that you don't still draw it on a really important turn when you're like, well, I'm against a black-green deck and that's Fry. Okay, well, I guess I'll concede now, when that could have been a blocker or any other kind of
even a land would be better is what that's the point, like when you get to that point. But yeah, there are corner cases when maybe you mainboard it. You have some combination of enough rummage and loot effects, and you have like 2 scuttlebutts. Then maybe I can see it, but that's going to happen very rarely. So yeah. I think the place to start at is don't mainboard it, because blank 30% of the time, good 70% of the time, averages out to still be kind of a bad card. So it's So I think that's what I would recommend there.
I do think it's interesting that you do have to factor in the London Mulligan, though, because, compared to the Vancouver Mulligan, it does give you a little more control, because if you do get it in your opening hand, that can be the card that you put on the bottom of your deck. And
well, unless you get it in your opening hand, in which case it's already like you mulligan down to 6.
That's true.
If you're against the right opponent.
It's definitely true.
So,
but it does give, and this might even just be like a couple of percentage points, not Frank Carson, so wouldn't be able to run the numbers for you on that, but it's some amount of points, in favor of that kind of a riskier play. But I agree, it's not worth it. Like the only time I could see is maybe putting the is it the white hate card that does red, that destroys red spells?
Destroys red spells. Oh, there's a blue one that can bounce spells. Basically, it bounces red and green spells. Yeah.
I could maybe see Aether Gust if the format becomes incredibly aggressive somehow, like Amonkhet or something. Because you remember back when Amonkhet, everyone just played red-white, or even M19. I guess M19 was pretty rampant with red-white too. Because
an arena may end up with a crazy metagame where people are forcing a certain archetype and suddenly this information becomes less true. You're like, if everyone's playing a red X deck, then suddenly the ones that hate on red are mainboardable. But That's not the case yet, and I'm hoping that doesn't happen, because if that happens, that usually means something's wrong on Magic Arena. So let's hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah, you really hope so. I would not count on it. I would say until you see pros that, making remarks about, I'm actually picking up points, doing that sort of thing, it's not worth your time, because they play a lot of games and they would know. But otherwise, just safer putting those things in the sideboard.
Yep, agreed. Is there anything about the new limited format that you want to cover before we move on to Recall?
We actually kind of covered my one sort of underrated card. And I say sort of underrated because I didn't realize that Howling Giant made 2 wolves. When I first read it, I just saw a 2/2 wolf token. I didn't see the number 2/2 wolf tokens, so I greatly underestimated how powerful that thing was. Like, even with 1 wolf token, it probably still would have been pretty good. But the fact that it brings 2 with it is insane.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's 7 mana for 9/9 worth of stats.
Yep.
Across 3 bodies in a format that cares about going wide. And it has reach in a format that has more flyers at common and uncommon than most. So, yeah, I mean, if a green player gets to play that and they're even at a reasonable amount of life, they're frequently just going to stabilize, and that's awesome. I like being the deck who drops the giant when I'm at 6 life and suddenly my opponent can't get me. So yeah. You can also abuse Enter the Battlefield triggers in this format a little bit. I think it's a little harder than I would like it to be, but you can, and obviously he's good with that too.
Well, that's what I was actually going to remark about was the black reanimator strategy can definitely abuse it with Blood for Bones. That was like the big payoff I saw with Howling Giant was the guy had, this is sealed, so I mean it might happen in draft still because they're still both just uncommons, but he had 2 Howling Giants in his deck, and he used Blood for Bones to sack a Howling Giant to play a Howling Giant out of his graveyard and then return the other Howling Giant from his graveyard back to his hand, and I just conceded right there.
Yeah, I've seen some nasty Blood for Bones things. I had somebody today on my stream play Gorging Vulture on turn 3, mill Villas, who's like the big demon, the 8 mana, 8/8 demon, who if you get it into play, you win, but you're not going to get it into play. Well, my opponent milled it in with Gorging Vulture, then played Blood for Bones, and they had that in play on turn 4, which felt like I was playing against like a Goryo's Vengeance deck in Modern or something. It was just like over on the spot. So yeah, that card enables some silly things, and it's a really cool design too. I think it's a well-designed card, and probably one I underrated a little bit too, because it does have some serious combo potential in this format.
Yeah, I don't think I underrated it so much, but it's definitely, been living up to expectations, and maybe like a half, point higher than I imagined.
I think you were higher on it than I was, so you were closer to right, I think.
Yeah, Embodiment of Agonies is one that I definitely think I overrated. Maybe I just didn't get the right deck built around it, but that's one that I tried to draft around. Just too many times it ended up in my first few draws, and then at that point I'm just looking at maybe a 1/1 or a 2/2 flyer because I didn't have. And again, this might be my bad that I'm not filling my graveyard enough, but I didn't have enough. I didn't have Blood for Bones, so I was afraid to mill too much and just mill out all of my good win conditions. So I didn't play the Vulture or anything to fill my graveyard. Maybe those two just have to be together. The Gorging Vulture.
I mean, I think the Vulture is a good card anyway, but then once you have that, I think you definitely want it.
Yeah, and maybe I'm underrating the Gorging Vulture too, because I think I might have passed on one for something probably a little more medium. But yeah,
I think the embodiment's okay. I think if you can't expect it to be this huge monster that wins you the game. It'll do that sometimes, but I mean, a 3 mana 1/1 flying Death Touch, which is what it is, that's not quite the worst case. The worst case is you can't cast it at all, and that does happen.
Yeah.
But if it's a 3 mana 1/1 flying Death Touch, that's all right. I mean, it's not awesome, but it can trade for anything, and it's evasive. So if you get it to 2/2, then I think you're really in business. And after that, yeah. So it is hard to set up sometimes. Because it can be a 0/0, and there, it does say non-land, so your Evolving Wilds can't set it up, which is a little frustrating. But yeah, it's a cool card, but you shouldn't think of it as a bomb really ever, I think. And if one is doing that, then yeah, I think they're making a mistake.
I was curious. Usually they say that the speed of a format can be a little bit tested by whether or not Overcome is playable. Have you found it playable in this set?
I think it is playable, yeah. I think the go wide deck can go wide real fast, real early. With turn 2, raise the alarm. Turn 3, the wolf. Just the 0/1 that makes a 2/2. If you're if you're in 3 colors, you can then play like the elemental on turn 4, and then overcome on turn 5 just ends the game. I mean, and that's like a bunch of commons and uncommons. There are more of those around that help you go wide. And yeah, I mean, I think overcome can win games for sure. I think it's better this time than it was in Amonkhet or wherever we saw it last time, because the go wide theme here is really, really well supported. It's not hard to go wide with commons and uncommons. So yeah, I think it is playable. I think inspired charges too. I think anytime you end up in a go wide deck, you want some combination of either like at least 2 things that are like inspired charge or overcome, whether that's 2 inspired charges, 2 overcomes, or 1 of each. I think you generally want those in the go wide deck, and they're going to win you the game a lot of the time. If your opponent can't really slow down your roll early, you're just going to run them over.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, definitely a little more grindy than some of those past ones that we've seen. Yeah, I'm excited to see how things progress from here. I'll let you know next time. I'll try to make sure I've got a little more drafts under my belt so we can maybe do a little bit deeper of a dive. So like I said, right now I'm a little light.
Yeah, I mean, even me, there's not that many cards I'm ready to say I was wrong or right about. Those are just the ones that have been sort of flashing in my face that I was wrong and right about. And I'm ready to say, even though I'm 20-ish drafts in, it's still kind of early to me, especially because some of those were in like the early access event, which was kind of wacky to begin with. But so yeah, next time we'll go a little deeper, talk some more about the format. Maybe, at some point in the future, I'm sure we'll give you tiers of the archetypes and things like that too, once we've played this format a bunch more, which will be in the next couple of weeks, hopefully.
Sit back and watch it burn.
Right on schedule.
So, as I mentioned earlier in this edition of Recall, we're going to be looking back at Magic Online, sort of roughly in the same stage that Arena's in now. A little earlier, maybe, because we're also going to be talking about like right when it was announced and stuff. Point is, right now, Magic Arena is kind of a contentious topic. While I think the majority of people who play the game are on board with it, there's still some vocal critics of it out there who feel that it is not a good way to play the game for a variety of reasons, and that maybe it'll kill Magic altogether, especially paper Magic. All that made me want to look back at the first time Wizards gave people the ability to play Magic on the internet from the comfort of their own home, and that was back in 2002 when they announced something new, at the time called Magic Online Digital Objects. If you ever wondered why it's MODO and not MTGO, that's why, because the abbreviation people use is usually MODO. Usually older players say that, and if you've ever wondered why, this is why.
Wow. I had no idea. I just kind of picked up on, because a lot of pros will still say that, or, people that have been around for a long time will call it Modo, and I thought it was some kind of weird, pronunciation of, Magic Online Do? I don't know. But
yeah.
Wow.
No, it's definitely weird because the name itself is weird. Magic Online Digital Objects. But it's 2002, so
17 years. Jeez.
Yeah, we call this Magic Online now, of course. And back then, it was really a revolutionary step. Magic Online gets a bad rap for looking like it's from 2002 and having a lot of problems. But there were no other collectible card games you could just play online at that time, and it was a big revolutionary step. Obviously, Magic Online started to lag behind other companies that were making online games, including exclusively digital games. And that's why we have Arena now. But the point is, it's important to note that Wizards was actually at the cutting edge of something that we may not always think about them being at in terms of especially electronic stuff. Game design, sure. It was a big step, and there were a lot of people whose reactions to it were more criticism than anything, and people had a lot of concerns as well about Magic Online. Some of which we'll see are related, or things we still see today when people are worried about Magic Arena. And as we'll see, you can kind of understand people being worried. They didn't have any idea. This wasn't something you could make a comparison to. There was nothing you could do to say, this is how it'll work, because there wasn't anything else. So we're going to talk about 3 different sort of arguments that people had about Magic Online at the time and what would maybe lead to its downfall and or the destruction of all of Magic. One of these is the idea that Magic Online would get hacked. In August of 2003, a little over a year after the release of Magic Online, Georgie Tate wrote an article for Star City Games in which he expressed serious concern over the possibility that the game would be hacked, and that would be the end of Magic Online. Now, one of his concerns was the typical one that people's information would be stolen, but the hacking that he was the most concerned about was that people would find a way to get into the online client and make it so that you, for example, always drew what you needed to, hack into the client and exploit it in every way they could. I think it's worth noting that he expresses this concern from the context of the time he's in. He is someone who played a lot of massive multiplayer online role-playing games back then, and he's not wrong that back then, lots of the big games definitely had people who found a way to hack into them, make their characters invulnerable, or give them amazing equipment. That was a thing back then. It doesn't seem, I'm not as into online role-playing games now as I was then. I played like Diablo 2 and RuneScape. And I remember I would just run into people who had a weapon that literally killed everything in the game with one hit. We know that didn't happen with Magic Online, but if people can find exploits in more complicated games, you'd think they're more complicated. Why didn't they find them in Magic Online, actually, is the question.
I mean, I understand why they wouldn't have, just the way that the client is set up, and I can definitely see the concern, especially back in the early 2000s, different times back then and different concerns. But I think the funniest part I find about this is that nowadays people trust Magic Online more than they do the paper game when it comes to cheating and exploits and things like that. Like, a huge thing that I saw in favor of, Arena and Magic Online is that people, after allegations regarding like Alex Bertoncini and people like that, oh, great, now the pros are going to have to play on a fair playing field, implying that pros cheat way more than they do. It's not ever as many people as you think it is, but it seems gets, quashed by the online client nowadays. But it is funny to think that back then, since they couldn't understand how it worked and see the inner workings of it, they thought, oh, people must be cheating, or the classic, oh, the MTGO shuffler is getting me again,
God, that is one of my biggest pet peeves. And I don't even know anything about programming, but I'm like, okay, well, even if you think it's the shuffler, everyone has to deal with the same shuffler and the same variants. So just like in real life, anyway, that always bothered me. People say it about Arena too. And it's like, yes, sometimes you get mana screwed, sometimes you flood. That's part of this game. It's not about skill alone. There is a lot of variance, but that idea, when I first read that, I was like, what is he talking about? But then I really did think back to gaming at the time, and it seemed like everybody was exploiting all of those games. And I don't feel like any other online games now either have nearly as much of an issue as they did back then. And I don't know historically enough about gaming and hacking to tell you why it was easier back then. But I think maybe just because it was in sort of a nascent state of online gaming and people were finding those ways in a little more easily. It doesn't seem to be happening now, and it never really happened on Magic Online. There was never anyone who figured out how to make sure they always drew what they needed to. So, this concern, luckily, was one that didn't end up actually causing any problems. Again, I can understand why Jordy was like, this could be a problem. This could ruin our game. We can't play this game the way it's meant to be played. So, that was one of the arguments. And he's not the only one to have said this is a serious concern. He also expanded on this further by sort of, again, comparing things to online games of the time. He was really worried that people would play Magic Online, accumulate cards, and then sell accounts like they do like they did back then, at least on massive multiplayer online role-playing games where you could like buy a RuneScape account that had everything on it that you needed with real money. And he thought that people who would sell those accounts would be the ones who were really figuring out the hacks because they were trying to make as much money as possible and do things as quickly as possible. In this case, I think he was kind of right. I mean, a secondary market for Magic Online pretty much did develop, and you can basically sell all the cards from an account for real money. People didn't use hacks to do it, but there's a secondary market for Magic Online that's very real, although it's less real now as Magic Arena is causing Magic Online now to die, basically, at least especially when it comes to standard legal cards. This is an example of how they didn't know what to look at. There wasn't something to compare it to. The closest thing was massive multiplayer online gaming at the time. And so drawing conclusions from that probably wasn't a bad idea. Another concern about it in general, it's sort of, I guess, it's a more general concern. And that is just that straight up, it's going to fail. Magic Online will fail. And there's no reason to put money into it or get involved with it in any way. This means getting involved is a risky proposition. You'd lose all the money you put into it once it went under. So this inevitability according to this line of thinking, is a result largely of how Magic Online decided to do business. So in early 2002, Sean Forney wrote an article called The Death of Magic Online, a name that hasn't aged very well because we're here 17 years later and Magic Online still exists. It's kind of dying now. Maybe you can write an article now called The Death of Magic Online. But he legitimately thought 17 years ago that this one particular decision meant Magic Online would be doomed to fail. He wrote this article during beta for Magic Online. In it, he expresses concern about the fact that booster packs on Magic Online and individual booster packs in paper were going to cost the same amount. Magic Online doesn't have a booster box option, and that actually meant it's cheaper to buy paper cards because you get a booster box in each pack. Back then was around $2 if you bought a booster box. On Magic Online, it would always be like $3.29 back then for a booster pack. There was no other option. Sean thought this was a horrible business model and that it would be impossible for anyone to want to spend a comparable amount of money on both paper and digital products. He argued that Magic Online should have cheaper booster packs because it would help ensure that the game would succeed. Sean ended his article by writing the following quote, "Given this staggeringly idiotic decision by Wizards, it is hard to see why anyone, barring the super rich, would even consider Magic Online. My advice is to get in on the beta test while you can, because the golden egg that is Magic Online will soon be crushed under the weight of Wizards' greed."
Oh, man. That definitely seems very quaint compared to now. I say that, though, and I've definitely heard these same exact arguments leveled at Magic Arena. But in this case, Magic Arena does actually have cheaper packs. Obviously there's a whole other rabbit hole you can go down about valuation, blah, 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 blah. But again, 17 years later, and people still have huge collections. And I definitely know for a fact that not just the richest of the rich have both paper and Magic Online cards.
Yeah, I mean, and this quote, I think, is, like you said, particularly interesting because you could just take Magic Online out and put Magic Arena in and say somebody said it today. And it would sound like, especially the criticism about the Mastery Pass and how that's Hasbro and Wizards being after a cash grab. It's the same basic idea here. The thing that I do think is interesting is that most Magic cards, in terms of being singles, do end up being cheaper on Magic Online in the long run. And that it doesn't seem like he was taking that sort of secondary market into account. So maybe the reason it succeeded, though, is because it is mostly cheaper to play on Magic Online. And it doesn't cost the same amount. You don't buy booster packs on Magic Online. That was something hard for him to think about at the time, clearly. But nobody buys packs on Magic Online. You use them for drafts, but you don't just open packs on Magic Online. What's there to gain out of that? You don't even get like the crinkly sound and the smell of the cards. It's just like a bunch of cards pop up on your screen. So nobody does that. So, he was predicting a world that didn't really come into being. And in the end, Magic Online, I think, did have cheaper cards than paper. And maybe that's why it was able to succeed for as long as it did. The world he envisioned didn't happen. And if things really did end up that way, where, buying your modern deck on Magic Online costs $800, just like buying your paper deck for Modern did, it is harder to imagine that working out. So I think, we're having criticisms here that are very fitting, even if he does, from my perspective, get a little intense talking about Wizards' staggering idiocy, but he was really upset about Magic Online not being what he wanted it to be. So it's somewhat understandable. And, something to think about too, and it's interesting, I haven't really heard people complain about it yet with Magic Arena, is you'd think there would be a risk of people selling accounts on Magic Arena. Like, it doesn't work on Magic Online, but on Arena, everything's tied to your account, I just thought about that. But
I think people certainly do sell full accounts, but, it's kind of that case with Magic Online as well. And I'm sure there is a certain degree of people getting their Magic Online accounts hacked and the cards all sent out, but there's digital paper trails in a way, for that stuff. And I did have to correct you on one thing. You do actually hear the sound of a pack opening when you open a pack on Magic Online.
I thought that only happened in drafts.
Oh, what's that? Yeah.
It might happen when you open a pack. I never do it. So
I think I did it once and then realized how much of an error it was. I'm like, nope, never doing that again.
Yeah, packs, if you trade packs, for anyone who's listening to this and still using Magic Online a lot, never open packs you win. Use them to enter drafts or depending on what they're worth, sell them for tickets. Sometimes it's better to sell the tickets, to get the tickets and use the tickets to enter because of value reasons. But usually it's better to just hold on to packs, use them to enter, pay tickets for packs on the trade tab thing, etc. But, how many people are listening to this are like actively using a Magic Online anymore? Yeah. Less and less is the answer.
I think the irony, you made that comparison to the MMOs at the time. Bots were a big way that people cheated in MMOs with like gold farmers and, just grinding experience and things like that. It turns out that's kind of what happened to Magic Online as well, is all these bot networks. And the reason that singles cost so little is because there's no shipping involved and everything is just so instantaneous with this giant network of bots that when a market is as fast and efficient as the bot network on Magic Online, because there's not a lot of middleman interaction, that price shrinks so much and is probably actually closer to what a real world value for a card should be. Because so many trades happen and so many drafts happen, that's why your price is so much lower per single compared to buying that same single off Card Kingdom where they've got employees and all this stuff that they have to consider when they set prices. And markets are pretty complicated places, but Magic Online is an example of when digital goods get traded that quickly, the prices, even though the packs are technically more expensive than paper, the prices still come down quite a bit.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a good point. 2 criticisms. One is just that it's going to fail because the economic model is idiotic. The other is it's going to get hacked. And then another criticism is sort of the opposite of either of those criticisms. And that's that Magic Online will be so successful that it's going to kill paper Magic entirely. There will be no more paper Magic. So this criticism, I didn't really highlight one author like I did for the other 2 because this is the one you'll find the most if you sort of delve into the wayback machine of the internet and go look at articles written from around this time. This is the most common concern that people have. There are lots of people who had to write rebuttals of these concerns because people were so concerned about it. And so this was the most common concern. It's especially interesting when compared to the one we just talked about, again, because it's sort of the polar opposite. So you had people envisioning Magic Online failing utterly and other people saying this is a threat to local game stores. This is a threat to Magic and paper in every way, shape, or form. And, this line of thinking pointed to the advantages of Magic Online. Playing whenever you want, which was especially awesome for people who wanted to draft. That's, in those days before Magic Online, the only way you could draft, it's hard to imagine now for those of us, the only way you could draft is if you went to a local game store or you got 7 of your friends together and you draft. You could only do it at very specific times when you could get 8 specific people in the same room. And Magic Online, from the beginning had draft and, you could just get on whenever you wanted and there'd be 7 other people in that digital room ready to draft basically all the time. And so that was a huge advantage that Magic Online has over paper Magic. And people with this concern had one basic concern. People who play Magic Online would not buy paper Magic cards at all. So it is sort of related to the previous concern. Why would anyone spend money on 2 different sets of cards? We already talked about this a little bit. There's a reason people do both. But I would say, while Magic Online and paper Magic continue to exist, I would say this last concern about Magic Online does kind of apply to me. I started playing like way back in 1998 when I was 10. And then I stopped playing around 2007. At that time, I only played paper Magic, and I thought Magic Online sounded stupid. I was basically one of these people who thought Magic Online sounded stupid. Why would I ever want fake cards on the internet? So I can sort of speak to this from my own perspective when Magic Online came out. And so I stopped around 2007. And when I came back around 2012, I started playing using Magic Online. It was the best way to get drafts in, which I liked drafts the first time I played between 1998 and 2007. But once I realized I could do them on Magic Online, that's when I really got into drafting and became addicted to it. And when I came back around 2012, I buy some paper cards, I play some paper Magic, but the majority of my Magic playing was on Magic Online. So I was sort of one of these people they were concerned about. And I don't think I'm the only one, but I do think most people continued to play, comparable amounts of paper and online Magic. And in the end, it didn't kill paper Magic, obviously enough, because paper Magic is still here. That's something people are concerned Arena is going to do too. You can see some of the same exact criticisms today about Magic Arena that we saw for Magic Online back in 2002.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Like I totally completely see where everyone comes with on these criticisms, but I mean I think it's just a testament to, paper, like tabletop gaming in general, that it still sticks around. Like right now, paper Magic is in a renaissance again. It's bigger than it's ever been. I mean, obviously people can argue that and say, well, like Magic Fests aren't always selling out, but I was at GP Seattle, or Magic Fest Seattle. It was wall to wall, brimming with people still excited to play the game. And I'm sure the number one thing when MTGO was coming out was, why would anyone ever leave the house again and go to a game store when they could just play from the comfort of their computer desk in their underwear? And a lot of people come to the game for different reasons, and I think a lot of people play Magic to be with friends and have a social experience. And
that's something. Magic Arena, Magic Online, neither of them so far has done the social experience part well at all. I mean, you can potentially, but it seems like that's going to be harder to accomplish, like short of having people have their webcams on basically while they're playing or something. I don't know. So you'll never be able to capture the social aspect that Paper Magic has in Arena or Magic Online. And if that's a big component of the game, you're not going to stop playing Paper Magic just because you can also play online.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe we'll eat our words someday when, MTGO suddenly makes a hard right turn and they update the interface and really lean in on this whole, like, it's for pros and, arenas for more casual players. But I feel like that's been really mixed messaging, because guess what? Most pros play on Magic Arena and they stream on Magic Arena. Like, I think it's pretty safe to say this time around, like you said, that MTGO, even if it doesn't ever totally die, if Liliana keeps it alive as a zombie, it's definitely, crawling.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I played on Magic Online for a long time, since 2012 or so, basically. And, in leagues, usually like the beginning of a league, there were like 6, 7, 8,000 active players in those leagues, like when a new format comes out. Now, because they have that gap where Arena doesn't have it, basically that's the only time I play Magic Online anymore. I get on Magic Online, there's about 1,000. And this is even in a world where Arena doesn't have it yet, but people are just not playing on Magic Online and they're just playing sealed on Arena because that's what's there. And they're just, not that many people are drafting on Magic Online anymore. And this is probably a topic for a whole other episode at some point, where we can talk about the pros and cons of Arena versus Magic Online for Limited. And there are pros and cons for both. But it seems like most people, the majority of players, and serious players too, because more serious players are supposed to be on Magic Online, but many of them have moved. For most of them, Magic Arena has enough pros to outweigh those cons, and Magic Online has too many cons to outweigh its pros. So I think Online may stick around for eternal formats, modern, legacy, vintage. But other than that, I mean, I think for Limited and I think for Standard, we're looking at Arena being the future.
Yep. Do you remember any other like specifics like that you heard from friends and other people like around the time that Magic Online was coming out?
I mean, yeah, I remember I had a friend who was really, really excited about the idea that you could, they had the redemption program wherein if you collected every card on Magic Online from a set, foil version, premium version, you then got a full paper set of that. And that's still a thing, I think. They may have actually discontinued it recently, but it was a thing for a very long time. And some people thought that was a reason. I had friends who had wanted to get into Magic Online because they thought that would be this really attainable thing. But it turns out it's kind of hard. But the whole idea of that system is part of what helped keep the secondary market a thing. But there are also some weird things on the secondary market as a result of that. Another tip, if you're ever playing Magic Online for some reason for Limited, is that if you open up a mythic rare, even if it's a garbage rare no one's playing, it's worth a lot of tickets because you have to use it for redemption. And so mythic rares are always worth way more, unless they're heavily played cards. But crappy mythic rares that are foil are worth more on Magic Online because of that weird reason. And foils in general are like artificially inflated on Magic Online because of that. But So I remember people being excited about that. But most of my friends, including myself, was just like, why would I ever not play with these physical cards right in front of me? Which is funny because I then became one of those people who mostly played Magic Online. So
yeah. So they actually still do set redemption. A lot of times everybody says if you're going to buy singles and you're not going to be in any tournaments anytime in the near future for paper, you always want to wait until redemption happens on Magic Online, because it actually does flood the paper market, especially with foils. Like if you want to buy a foil, always wait until the Magic Online redemption happens, because a lot of those collectors then turn around and they make a pretty nice profit off of buying all the foils on MTGO, getting them redeemed, and then selling them to your card kingdoms and places like that, or on eBay, which then affects the prices on places like on all the big resellers. So yep,
there you go. Still, I would imagine that as Magic Online wanes for standard formats, that may be discontinued sooner rather than later. But as of now, it's still around, and it's been around since the beginning. That redemption idea, which is a cool idea, I think.
Yeah, that's what gives the cards actual value. Like if they did not have redemption, the Magic Online economy would be nothing. It really wouldn't have any way to assign, because as you know, if you ever played on Magic Online, $1 equals 1 ticket. And that's why you see sometimes comparable prices between paper and digital cards, because they are, somewhat based on each other due to the fact that you can then redeem that card to then sell that card as a paper card. And even now we still see the occasional card like from Modern Horizons, Ren and 6 is like $100 on Magic Online, which holy cow, like not even a couple months ago, like after that article on Channel Fireball came out, I don't remember who wrote it, but they wrote basically the death knell of Magic Online and told everybody like sell your collections. And that did actually cause a massive sell-off, which then made standard prices go super, super low. Like you could get, I was just curious looking at a deck around that time. I think it was back in winter around around the Guilds of Ravnica. And the same standard deck was only $30 to $40 on Magic Online compared to like $300 to $400 in paper. I think it was like Esper Control of some kind, like with Teferi and things like that. And all those
That's
prices
crazy.
just bombed. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Ren and 6 is a card that is going to be played mostly only in Modern, Legacy, and Vintage. So it kind of makes sense that it would stay up. But it isn't a really expensive card in paper too, isn't it? I mean, not $100, but $50, $60. I was looking at it the other day for some reason. It's in high demand because of how good it is in like Life from the Loam and Dredge decks and stuff. So that's pretty cool. When I saw that Planeswalker spoiled, I thought it looked pretty cool, but didn't really think about it actually like breaking Modern or being a huge impact in Modern. But turns out they knew what they were doing by making that in Modern Horizons.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason there is it revitalized a archetype that a lot of people loved and had decks for, because Jund, was a really big player for so many years. It was always, I felt like, I remember when I joined, it always sounded like the steady deck, like it always was consistent, and then it just dropped since I started playing back in Shadows over Innistrad. So I think even the glimpse of hope that Jund can make a comeback has probably pushed that card way high, because I bet a lot of people are sitting on old Jund decks or parts of old Jund decks and everything. So anyways.
Probably so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Magic Online, Magic Arena, looking at the beta tests, 17 years apart from each other, there are certainly some parallels, some similar concerns. We don't know the future for sure. Who knows? Maybe Magic Arena will kill Paper Magic. I don't think it will, but maybe we'll end up being wrong this time. And in 17 years, someone will be talking about this podcast and how stupid we were. But for now, I don't think it's going to kill Paper Magic or anything like that. I think they can coexist as they have for a very long time.
Do you want to make any predictions that'll sound dumb if somebody like excavates our podcast years from now?
It's a good question. Flood of Tears is going to get banned out of Standard.
Ooh. Yeah, that one's a pretty long shot.
Yeah.
I think, if we're going to talk Standard, I think Risen Reef might have a slight shot. I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're just going to let the format kind of warp around it. But
I mean, if Teferi was allowed to stay.
Yeah, that's very true. I'm going to call that pessimistically, even in the next 4 years, Magic Arena is not going to have multiplayer, and they're going to come up with another new platform to have like multiplayer Magic, except it's going to be like its own thing and maybe an entirely own developed game that just uses Magic's rule set. And they're going to force yet another platform down our throat because Hasbro wants money. And that's why they haven't implemented it on Arena, is because they knew they could make an entirely other game to go along with Arena that is for like Commander style people. But again, it's going to be its own siloed thing, and like, oh, I hope I'm not right.
Unfortunately, it doesn't sound that far-fetched.
I know. So that's why I'm going to make that prediction, because if I'm right,
it could happen.
I will be Nostradamus about, feature site. Got it.
You've got it. The card or the actual ability?
Oh, I actually do have the card. We got that in our seal pool at Seattle.
Nice. All right, well, that does it for this episode. Before we go, we do, of course, want to plug our things. If you enjoy this podcast or my other content, you can go to my Patreon and you can contribute as little as $1. You get access to a Discord server. Planning on eventually also having patron questions that we answer on here as well. So that's another benefit. You can also find me on Twitter at Nizzahon Magic, and you can find Mike at Mythic Tales Mike. Do you want to tell them about your recent metal animation and get people pointed in that direction?
Yeah, I realize I actually had that one out. But if you haven't seen it yet somehow still, if you want to check it out on my YouTube channel, I did upload it there, even though it's kind of a funky size ratio for YouTube. It's just Mythic Tales Mike, or Mythic Tales, sorry. You can search Mythic Tales, but you should follow me on Twitter, Mythic Tales Mike, if you're interested in anything related to the art of the game. I repost a lot of stuff with Magic art and discuss it. Hopefully I can get back to doing my like daily art little mini appreciation posts. In the meantime, if you actually make it to this point in the podcast, please let us know what you're thinking about it, and if there's anything you'd like to hear or see if you're on the video version. Any feedback would be great. So thank you for listening.
Yep. So that does it for this episode. We'll be back next time to talk some about Core Set 2020 and Limited again, and of course looking back at the game's history with another edition of Recall. So thanks for watching and listening, and have a nice day.
Let's go out with a bang!
Sit back and watch it burn.